Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The church bells held their peace, a heavy quiet that amplified the frantic drumbeat in Jebediah's chest. The starched collar of his new suit felt like a noose, its coarse fabric a cruel counterpoint to the phantom caress of Sarah's skin he'd envisioned. Sunlight, fractured by stained glass, splashed across the altar, a gaudy stage for the disaster unfolding. Early he was, brimming with hope, determined to make everything flawless for Sarah. He'd even wheedled Mrs. Henderson into sacrificing her prize-winning roses, knowing Sarah's fondness for them. A glance at the pews revealed a congregation of expectant faces, their murmurs a susurrus that prickled his skin. Martha Olson, her visage a tight mask of disapproval, occupied her customary front-row seat, her gaze a palpable weight. He could almost hear the scandalous tale she was already crafting, ready to be disseminated through the town like wildfire. He shifted, the altar wood cold and slick under his touch. Where was she? Each passing minute hammered of his dwindling optimism. The whispers intensified, charged with a nervous electricity that mirrored his own mounting panic. His eyes met Pastor Price's near the entrance, Sarah's father, his expression an inscrutable mask. A curt nod offered a meager reassurance, yet did little to quell the tide of Jebediah's apprehension. A lone fly, buzzing with indolent disregard, punctuated the oppressive quiet. Jebediah dabbed at the perspiration beading on his forehead. He conjured Sarah's image, her dazzling smile, the incandescent sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of their shared tomorrow, a future meticulously crafted, now dissolving like smoke in the wind. A disturbance at the rear of the church finally shattered the suffocating stillness. Not the anticipated rustle of silk and lace, but the frantic footfalls of Mr. Jenkins, Sarah's father, his face drained of color. He forced his way through the crowd, his breath coming in rugged gasps. Reaching Jebediah, he grasped his arm, his hand trembling violently. "Jebediah," he rasped, his voice barely audible. She's gone." The words hung, leaden and suffocating. Jebediah could only stare, his mind failing to grasp the enormity of the statement. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" Mr. Jenkins swallowed hard, shame etching lines around his eyes. She has eloped with that gambler, Cassidy." A collective intake of breath swept through the sanctuary. Martha Olson's eyes widened, her lips pursing into a perfect picture of smug vindication. The whispers sharpened, now edged with condemnation. Jebediah felt the color leach from his face. His knees threatened to betray him. "Cassidy?" he repeated, the name leaving a bitter residue on his tongue. He recalled witnessing Sarah speaking with the man at the saloon weeks prior, dismissing it as mere courtesy. How naive he had been. Mr. Jenkins wrung his hands, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I found a note. She said she couldn't marry you, Jebediah. She needed more." "More what? More excitement? More lucre than he could ever provide?" The questions tore at him, each a fresh incision. He scanned the faces in the pews, their expectant smiles replaced by morbid curiosity and poorly veiled pity. He was an object of derision, a fool marooned at the altar, his heart a shattered mosaic. He caught Susannah Price's gaze near her father, her expression a complex blend of sadness and something else he couldn't quite define, perhaps pity. He averted his eyes, unable to withstand her scrutiny. I "I don't understand," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He had lavished her with affection, given her all he possessed. He had built a home, toiled tirelessly to secure their shared destiny. How could she inflict this? Mr. Jenkins shook his head, tears now overflowing. "I am so sorry, Jebediah. Truly. I tried to dissuade her, but she would not listen." The silence descended once more, heavier than before. The unringing bells seemed to mock his anguish, their absence a deafening indictment. He longed to vanish, to be swallowed whole by the earth. He wanted to flee, to outrun the judging gazes and the barbed whispers. Frozen in place, he endured what felt like an eternity, the weight of his humiliation, a crushing burden. Jebediah Stone, the man scorned at the altar. Laughter would dog his footsteps, whispers would haunt his dreams. He was undone. Summoning a monumental effort, he moved. Head bowed, eyes fixed on the floor, he began his slow march down the aisle. He felt the collective stare boring into his back, the suffocating weight of their judgment. Reaching the church doors, he stumbled out into the sunlight, its warmth unable to penetrate the icy grip of despair clenching his heart. He walked aimlessly, indifferent to his destination, seeking only escape, a sanctuary where he could tend to his ravaged soul. He walked until the town's edge blurred into open fields. He kept walking. Sarah's radiant smile seared into his mind, a constant reminder of his folly. He slumped onto a weathered fence post, the rough wood grating against his skin. He gazed at the horizon, the vast, empty prairie echoing the emptiness within him. The wind howled, carrying the scent of impending rain and the distant rumble of thunder, a fitting accompaniment to his misery. He remained there for hours, consumed by his thoughts, replaying every shared moment with Sarah, searching for elusive clues, for any premonition of her discontent. He found none. He had been blind, blinded by adoration, by his fervent belief in their future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange, he finally stirred. He couldn't remain there indefinitely. He had to return, face the aftermath, and salvage what remained of his shattered existence. But as he turned toward town, he knew he was irrevocably changed from the hopeful man who had entered the church that morning. He was a broken vessel, scarred and weary, indelibly marked by the sting of abandonment. He walked with deliberate slowness, each step burdened by the weight of his disappointment. He passed the saloon, the raucous sounds of laughter and music spilling into the street. He quickened his pace, desperate to avoid a confrontation with Cassidy, unable to bear the image of Sarah in his arms. He reached his house, the small cottage he had lovingly built for them, the place that was meant to be their sanctuary. He hesitated at the doorway, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. It was no longer their home, merely a shell, haunted by the ghosts of unfulfilled promises. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was shrouded in shadows, the air thick with dust and the scent of shattered dreams. He lit a lamp, its flickering light casting macabre patterns on the walls. He surveyed the scene, his gaze lingering on Sarah's unfinished embroidery, the dog-eared novel lying open on the table, the empty vase yearning for the roses he had promised. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, and wept. He wept for Sarah, for their lost future, for the shattered remnants of the man he once was. He wept until his wellspring of tears ran dry, leaving him emptied, hollowed out by grief and despair. He lost track of time, consumed by his anguish. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he succumbed to sleep, his dreams tormented by visions of Sarah, her laughter echoing through the vacant house. He awoke the next morning, his heart heavy, his head throbbing. The sun shone brightly, yet the day felt bleak and devoid of color. He rose, dressed, and ventured outside, compelled to face a world he no longer desired. As he walked the street, he felt their stares, heard their whispers. He kept his gaze lowered, striving to remain oblivious. He passed Martha Olson, who gifted him with a knowing smirk. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to retaliate. He entered the general store, in need of supplies. The bell above the door announced his arrival. Mr. Henderson, the proprietor, greeted him with a somber smile. "Jebediah," he said softly, "I am sorry for what transpired." Jebediah nodded, rendered speechless. He gathered his necessities, paid swiftly, and sought escape. As he turned to depart, he spotted Susannah Price conversing with her father. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with compassion. Mortified and ashamed, he averted his eyes. He exited the store and trudged back to his desolate house, the weight of the town's condemnation pressing down on him. He knew he had to leave, to outrun the murmurs and the stares. He could not remain there, not after this. He devoted the remainder of the day to packing his meager belongings. He had little of material value, but it was sufficient. He would seek a new beginning elsewhere, though he lacked any clear plan. As dusk approached, he loaded his possessions onto his wagon. He cast one final glance at the house that was meant to be his home, then climbed aboard and drove away, leaving behind the community that scorned him, the woman who had broken his heart, and the life that had ceased to exist. He journeyed into the encroaching darkness, toward an uncertain future, clinging to the hope that somewhere, somehow, he might find redemption. Dust and despair, the dust swirled around Jebediah's boots as he rode back to the ranch, each gust a mocking reminder of the emptiness that now echoed within him. The once familiar landscape seemed alien, the golden hues of the setting sun painting the fields with a cruel beauty he couldn't appreciate. He'd pictured this ride 1,000 times, Sarah by his side, their laughter carried on the wind as they returned to their shared home. Now, the only sound was the rhythmic thud of his horse's hooves and the gnawing ache in his chest. The ranch house stood silent and unwelcoming. The porch swing, which he'd painstakingly repaired just last week, hung motionless. He dismounted, his movements stiff and heavy, and led his horse to the stable. The familiar scent of hay and horseflesh usually brought a sense of comfort, but tonight it only amplified the hollowness. He unsaddled the animal, his hands moving mechanically, his mind replaying the scene at the church over and over. He saw Sarah in her white dress, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle. He remembered the tremor in his own hands as he reached for hers, the swell of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. Then, the whispers, the growing unease, the empty space beside him as she disappeared. And Cassidy, the gambler, with eyes as cold as a winter sky, leading her away. He stumbled into the house, the scent of Sarah's lavender soap still lingering in the air, a phantom touch that sent a fresh wave of pain through him. He sank into the worn armchair by the fireplace, the rough fabric scratching against his skin. He closed his eyes, willing himself to forget, but the memories clung to him like shadows. He remembered their first meeting, at the town social. He'd been too shy to approach her, admiring her from afar as she laughed with her friends. Then she'd tripped, and he'd been there to catch her. Her hand had lingered in his, her eyes, the color of warm honey, meeting his. He'd stammered something foolish, but she'd laughed, a musical sound that had captivated him instantly. Their courtship had been slow and gentle, filled with stolen moments under the starry sky, whispered promises, and shared dreams. They'd planned everything, the ranch, the children, the life they would build together. Now, those dreams lay shattered, scattered like dust in the wind. A knock on the door startled him. He didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to face the pitying glances and hushed whispers. But the knocking persisted, insistent and unwavering. Finally, with a sigh, he dragged himself to the door. Caleb stood on the porch, his face etched with concern. He held a covered dish in his hands. "Brought you some stew, Jebediah," he said, his voice low and gentle. "Figured you might not have eaten." Jebediah hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing Caleb to enter. The aroma of the stew filled the small room, a small beacon of warmth in the desolate space. Caleb placed the dish on the table. He didn't say anything, just stood there, his presence a silent offer of support. "I don't understand," Caleb Jebediah finally said, his voice hoarse. I thought she loved me." Caleb pulled up a chair and sat down. He looked at Jebediah, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "Sometimes things ain't always what they seem, Jebediah. Sometimes people make mistakes." "A mistake?" Jebediah's voice rose, laced with bitterness. "Running off with a gambler on our wedding day. That's not a mistake, Caleb. That's a deliberate act of cruelty." Caleb remained silent, allowing Jebediah to vent his anger and pain. He knew there were no words that could truly ease the hurt, but he also knew that sometimes just having someone listen could make a difference. "The whole town's laughing at me," Jebediah continued, his voice dropping again. "I'm a fool, Caleb, a laughing stock." "That ain't true, Jebediah," Caleb said firmly. "Folks might be talking, but they'll forget soon enough. You're a good man, Jebediah. You're hard-working, honest, and kind. That's more than most folks can say." Jebediah shook his head, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It doesn't matter. She's gone, and she took everything with her." Caleb reached out and placed a hand on Jebediah's shoulder. "She didn't take everything, Jebediah. You still got your ranch, your friends, you still got yourself." Jebediah looked up at Caleb, his eyes filled with a mixture of grief and gratitude. He knew Caleb was right, but the words offered little comfort. The pain was still too raw, the humiliation too deep. "Eat some stew," Caleb said gently. "It'll do you good." Jebediah reluctantly picked up a spoon and took a bite. The stew was hearty and flavorful, but it tasted like ashes in his mouth. He swallowed it down, forcing himself to eat. Caleb stayed for a while longer, offering quiet conversation and unwavering support. As the night wore on, Jebediah felt a sliver of hope flicker within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. Maybe, someday, he could even find happiness again. But the road ahead seemed long and arduous, and the dust of despair clung to him like a shroud. He knew it would take time and a lot of strength to shake it off and find his way back to the light. A daughter's kindness heat shimmered above the cracked earth as Susannah Price steered her buckboard toward Jebediah's homestead. The sun, a malevolent eye in the sky, offered no mercy, yet she urged the team onward, her determination fueled by a deep-seated empathy. Her bonnet was a flimsy shield against the onslaught, and she blotted the beads of sweat forming above her brow. The townsfolk's gazes, a blend of pity and veiled censure directed at Jebediah after Sarah's ignominious flight, had ignited a fierce protectiveness within her, a response forged in the crucible of her own loss. The ranch house stood silent, the porch swing motionless, the windows like vacant eyes. Susannah reined in the buckboard, the horses stamping restlessly. Hitching them to the post, she descended, boots crunching on the arid ground. A moment's hesitation flashed across her features before she banished it, advancing to the front door, knuckles poised to knock. Before she could, the aged wood groaned inward, revealing Jebediah framed in shadow. He appeared skeletal, his eyes hollow pits, a devastating contrast to the jovial man she remembered, the man whose eyes had held a spark of perpetual optimism. He still wore the dark wedding suit, now a disheveled testament to neglect. "Susannah," he croaked, his voice a threadbare whisper. "What brings you here?" I came to see how you are holding up," she answered softly, resisting the urge to offer a touch, sensing its unwelcome reception. He retreated, granting her passage into the gloom. The air hung heavy with neglect and the ghost of sour whiskey. A half-empty bottle shared space with scattered cards on the table. A world away from the pristine haven she'd witnessed him curate only days before. "As you can plainly see," he remarked, gesturing wearily, "I'm thriving." He attempted a wry smile, but it failed to reach his desolate eyes. Susannah chose to ignore the barb. "Caleb filled me in on what transpired," she said gently. "I'm profoundly sorry, Jebediah." He averted his face. "Don't be. It's just life, I suppose. Some are destined for bliss, others not so fortunate." "Don't speak like that," Susannah countered, her tone firm. "That's simply untrue. Everyone is worthy of happiness, Jebediah. Even you." He scoffed, the sound laced with bitterness. "Easier said than done, Susannah. You haven't been publicly humiliated, abandoned at the altar for all to mock." She moved closer, her gaze unwavering. "No, I haven't. But I comprehend the agony of losing someone precious. I know the devastation of a shattered heart." Jebediah finally met her gaze, surprise flickering within his shadowed eyes. He'd always viewed Susannah as a beacon of grace, the untouched daughter of the preacher, sheltered from life's harsh realities. He was wrong. "My mother," Susannah began, her voice barely audible. "She succumbed when I was just 10. Consumption. One day vibrant and singing, the next gone. It felt like the world imploded. For an eternity, I doubted I could ever experience joy again." Jebediah regarded her, his own anguish momentarily eclipsed by a nascent understanding. He perceived a depth he had overlooked, a quiet fortitude forged in the fires of grief. "It certainly doesn't feel that way now," he confessed, his voice subdued. "But it improves, doesn't it?" "It does," Susannah assured him. "It transforms, but it improves. You'll discover a way to coexist with the pain, to reclaim joy. You must." A protracted silence descended, punctuated only by the house's groans under the afternoon sun. Jebediah raked a hand through his tangled hair, his eyes fixed on the floorboards. "I'm at a loss," he finally admitted, despair lacing his words. "I feel hollowed out, as if every belief I held dear was a deception." "It wasn't a deception, Jebediah," Susannah insisted, her voice both tender and resolute. "Your love for Sarah was authentic, but she wasn't your destined partner. That doesn't invalidate your feelings or diminish your character." He lifted his gaze, his eyes searching for truth. "Do you genuinely believe that?" "I do," she affirmed, meeting his gaze squarely. "I believe you are a good man, Jebediah Stone, a fundamentally decent man, and you merit happiness." He averted his gaze once more, his face a canvas of doubt. "The entire town is whispering, declaring I'm jinxed, that I'll remain forever unwanted." "Let them whisper," Susannah retorted, her voice gaining an edge. "Their opinions are inconsequential. What truly matters is your self-perception." She approached the table, picking up a playing card. A face-down queen of hearts. Flipping it over, she revealed its vibrant hues. "Life hands us diverse decks, Jebediah," she said softly. "Sometimes a favorable hand, sometimes a dreadful one. But the cards themselves are less important than the way we choose to play them." Returning the card to the table, she met his gaze. "Don't allow Sarah's choices to define you. Don't let the town's gossip crush you. You possess the strength to transcend this, Jebediah. I know you do." He studied her, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw compassion mirrored in her eyes, genuine concern etched into her features. He glimpsed a strength that resonated with his own, a resilience tempered by suffering. And for the first time since Sarah's departure, a fragile spark of hope ignited within him. "Thank you, Susannah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For coming, for saying all of this." "I wanted to," she responded, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Jebediah hesitated, then nodded faintly. Perhaps you might consider staying for supper. I haven't had a decent meal in days." Susannah's smile blossomed. "I'd be delighted." As Susannah busied herself restoring order to the kitchen, a task Jebediah weakly protested before surrendering to her capable hands, a sense of quiet camaraderie permeated the small house. The atmosphere felt lighter, the shadows less menacing. Jebediah watched her, a silent spectator, as she moved with both grace and efficiency, a testament to her inner strength. The comforting clatter of dishes and the gentle melody of her voice as she began preparing a simple stew filled a void he hadn't realized existed. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as entirely alone as he had believed. Perhaps there was indeed a faint glimmer of light awaiting him at the far end of the tunnel he had been traveling. Whispers in the wind, the days that followed flowed into a soothing current, a salve for Jebediah's injured soul. Susannah became a regular presence in the afternoons, bearing with her a dog-eared Whitman anthology or a compilation of Tennyson's verses. Beneath the broad-limbed oak bordering his property, they'd settle, the leaves murmuring a tranquil harmony to her recitations. Other times, she simply chatted, painting pictures of small-town life, with anecdotes of her father's eccentricities, the church lady's relentless requests. Jebediah discovered himself captivated by her light-hearted laughter, the delightful crow's feet forming around her eyes when she grinned, the unfeigned sincerity emanating from her. He began to await her visits with an eagerness he hadn't experienced in years, a fragile hope sprouting anew within him. One sun-drenched afternoon, as Susannah voiced a passage concerning the interconnectedness of existence, Jebediah spotted a figure observing them from the lane. Martha Olson, arms folded tightly, lips pressed into a thin, judgmental line. Discomfort prickled him, a familiar tide of insecurity surging. He was, after all, Jebediah Stone, the man publicly disgraced, the town's spectacle. What right had he to enjoy the company of the preacher's daughter? Martha offered no wave, no acknowledgment nevertheless. By the next day, the rumors had begun. Initially subtle, a hushed exchange abruptly ceasing as he passed the mercantile, a lingering stare from the women congregated near the church. But soon, the whispers swelled, grew bolder, carried on the breeze like errant milkweed seeds, finding fertile ground wherever they landed. "Did you see Susannah Price at Jebediah Stone's again yesterday?" Martha's voice, brittle as spun glass, cut through the air at the bakery, where Susannah was considering a sourdough loaf. "Reading poetry," If you can believe it. Hardly fitting, is it? A respectable young lady associating with, well, you know. Agnes, the baker's wife, giggled nervously, darting a glance toward Susannah. He's a damaged man, poor dear. I suppose he needs someone to hear him out. Hear him out? Martha scoffed. That's not the impression I get. She's practically taken up residence there. And after what transpired? With Clara's scandalous departure? It's simply outrageous. Susannah's face burned crimson. She slapped a coin onto the counter, snatched the bread, and pivoted to face Martha, her eyes flashing. Outrageous, is it, Martha? Is it outrageous to extend kindness to someone in need? Is offering friendship scandalous? Martha's self-satisfied demeanor wavered slightly under Susannah's unwavering gaze. It's unconventional, Susannah. And frankly, it casts a poor light. People are wagging their tongues. Let them wag, Susannah countered, her voice trembling with barely restrained indignation. I won't apologize for offering solace to a man who's endured his own private hell. Jebediah is a good soul, a compassionate soul, and he deserves better than the chattering and verdicts of narrow-minded individuals. Like yourself. She spun around and exited the bakery, the aroma of warm bread soured by the bitter taste of injustice. Later that evening, seated with Jebediah under the oak, the setting sun daubing the sky with fiery shades of orange and violet, Susannah couldn't dispel the echo of Martha's words. She'd attempted to dismiss it, to feign indifference to the gossip, but the truth was, it wounded her. She knew her father wouldn't condone her continued companionship with Jebediah. He had already voiced his concerns, gently intimating that she might be squandering her affections on a hopeless case. And now, with the entire town abuzz with speculation, the pressure would only escalate. Jebediah, sensing her distress, reached out and gently enclosed her hand in his. His touch radiated warmth and reassurance, a silent offer of solidarity. What weighs on your mind, Susannah? He inquired softly. She hesitated for a moment, then unburdened herself, relating the encounter with Martha, the town's tittle-tattle, her father's disapproval. I don't want to bring you any more grief, Jebediah, she confessed, her voice barely audible. Perhaps I shouldn't visit so frequently. Jebediah's grip tightened on her hand. Don't speak like that, Susannah, he implored, his voice infused with quiet earnestness. You're the single bright spot that's entered my life in ages. You've rekindled a hope I thought extinguished. Don't allow the petty rumors of others to steal that away. He rose and walked a few paces, gazing out across the pasture. I'm aware of what people think of me, Susannah. I'm not oblivious. They perceive a broken man, a failure, and perhaps they are correct. Perhaps I am. But you perceive something different, don't you? Susannah stood, her heart aching for him. I perceive a man of kindness, a man of honor, a man possessing a good heart. I see a man who has suffered greatly, yes, but who also possesses remarkable strength and tenacity. I see a man who deserves happiness. Jebediah turned back to face her, his eyes reflecting a blend of hope and incredulity. Do you truly believe that, Susannah? I do, she affirmed, stepping closer to him. And I couldn't care less what anyone else believes. She reached up and gently caressed his cheek, her fingers tracing the worry lines etched around his eyes. I refuse to let them dictate my friendships or the course of my life. I'm staying, Jebediah. I'm staying because I choose to. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze probing her face, as if seeking confirmation of her sincerity. And then, gradually, a smile bloomed across his face, a genuine, heartfelt smile that illuminated his eyes. "Thank you, Susannah," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for having faith in me when I had none for myself." The moment suspended between them, charged with unspoken emotions, a silent pledge of something deeper. The whispers on the wind persisted, but now they seemed fainter, less consequential, drowned out by the burgeoning optimism within their hearts. New light the sun, a fiery forge overhead, relentlessly baked Jebediah's shoulders, each bead of sweat a testament to his exertion. He drove yet another fence post into the stubborn earth, the hammer's ring a percussive counterpoint to the cicada's drone. Hoping Susannah repair Mrs. Abernathy's decaying fence felt a world away from the ambitions he once harbored, yet a strange satisfaction bloomed within him. The elderly widow, fragile in frame but sturdy in spirit, lacked the funds to hire help, and Susannah, moved by her deep empathy, had stepped in. Initially reluctant, Jebediah found himself willingly ensnared by her gentle pull, eager to lend his strength. Nearby, Susannah knelt, meticulously weaving wire through the aged mesh, her brow creased in concentration. Though marked by labor, her hands possessed an unexpected elegance as they danced across the splintered wood. He watched her, a warmth unrelated to the scorching sun blossoming in his chest. He'd noted the way sunlight painted gold onto the strands of her auburn hair, the soft curve of her lips when she spoke with Mrs. Abernathy, the unwavering kindness that shimmered in her slate-gray eyes. A desolate numbness had been his constant companion since Elizabeth's abandonment, a wound that throbbed with humiliation and disbelief. He'd questioned his own judgment, the very nature of love, the possibility of a brighter future. But Susannah, with her quiet fortitude and abiding faith in him, had begun to thaw the icy shell around his heart. He still battled the specter of shame, the echoes of the wedding that wasn't. Whispers followed him like shadows, the sting of pitying glances, the weight of knowing smirks. He was Jebediah Stone, the forsaken fiancé, a brand he feared would forever sear his identity. Yet, in Susannah's presence, those labels seemed to fray at the edges, replaced by a nascent hope, a future he hadn't dared imagine. He observed her stand, dusting off her skirt. "That should hold for a while," she announced, her voice bright and encouraging. "Thank you, Jebediah. Your help has been invaluable." "It's the very least I could do," he responded, his voice thick with restrained emotion. He yearned to articulate the depth of her friendship, how she had rescued him from the abyss, but the words remained trapped within him. Instead, he focused on collecting the scattered tools. Mrs. Abernathy shuffled towards them, her gait unsteady, her grip tight on her gnarled cane. "You, too, are a welcome sight," she rasped, her voice etched with age. "Susannah, you're a genuine blessing, and Jebediah, your strong back is a gift. This old woman appreciates it more than words can express." Susannah clasped the widow's hand in hers. "Nonsense, Mrs. Abernathy. We were delighted to assist." As they made their way back toward the farmhouse, Jebediah risked another glance at Susannah. The realization struck him with the force of a lightning bolt. His feelings for her were ripening into something far deeper than mere platonic affection. It wasn't simple gratitude or admiration. It was a profound, undeniable pull. He was falling for her, hard. The revelation both thrilled and filled him with apprehension. He was scarred, a social outcast in many eyes. He possessed nothing to offer her, certainly not the secure life she deserved. Her father, Reverend Price, would surely disapprove. And, crucially, how did Susannah truly see him? As nothing more than a friend? A pity case? He banished the doubts, grounding himself in the present. He would proceed with caution, he vowed. He would not pressure her. He would simply be present, as she had been for him, trusting that, in time, she might regard him with different eyes. Reaching the sanctuary of a towering oak, Susannah retrieved a water skin from her shoulder bag. She offered it to Jebediah, her fingers brushing against his as he accepted it. A surge of awareness jolted through him, prompting him to quickly look away. He drank deeply, the cool water soothing his parched throat. "Thank you," he mumbled, returning the skin. Susannah quenched her thirst, then secured the cap. "We ought to head back soon," she mentioned. "My father expects me for supper." As they resumed their walk, a playful spark ignited in Susannah's gaze. "Did you catch Bessie's expression when you were hammering that post?" she queried, referring to Mrs. Abernathy's prized cow. "I genuinely think she thought you intended to nail her to the fence." Jebediah chuckled, the sound rough from long disuse. He conjured the image of the cow's bewildered countenance, its large liquid eyes wide with fright. He began to laugh, a true, heartfelt eruption that even surprised him. Susannah joined in, her laughter like the tinkling of wind chimes carried on the breeze. The sound filled him with a levity he hadn't known in what felt like eons. He halted, mesmerized by her radiant presence, her cheeks flushed with mirth, her eyes shimmering with delight. "You have a wonderful laugh, Jebediah," she observed, her voice gentle. "You should let it out more often." He studied her, truly saw her, and detected not pity or sympathy, but honest affection. For the first time since Elizabeth's defection, he felt a fragile flicker of belief that perhaps, just perhaps, he was worthy of love. The journey back to the Price farm unfolded in comfortable camaraderie, a pleasant silence woven with the sounds of nature. Jebediah found himself confiding in Susannah in ways he never thought possible, revealing his aspirations and insecurities, his triumphs and failures. She listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and understanding. As they reached the gate, Susannah faced him, her expression sober. "Thank you, Jebediah," she said sincerely, "for everything." He felt a powerful urge to reach out, to clasp her hand in his, but hesitated, uncertain of her response. Instead, he simply offered a nod. "Any time, Susannah." He watched as she walked towards the house, her silhouette framed by the golden hues of the setting sun. He knew he was venturing into treacherous territory, that his deepening affection for her could well lead to heartache and disappointment. Yet he was helpless to resist. He was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, and he knew, with a conviction that stirred both excitement and fear within him, that his life was irrevocably changed. He stood there, the twilight dust swirling around his worn boots, and for the first time in what seemed a lifetime, Jebediah Stone entertained a fragile sense of hope, a belief that perhaps, against all odds, he could find happiness once more. The cattle baron arrives. The dust cloud arrived first, a swirling tan leviathan heralding the approach of something significant. Susannah, perched on Jebediah's porch swing, paused mid-sentence, her story about the new litter of kittens at the parsonage abruptly cut short. Jebediah, who had been whittling idly, stilled his knife. The air grew thick with anticipation, a collective holding of breath that seemed to grip the entire town of Harmony Creek. Then came the rumble, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards and into their bones. It was the sound of money, power, and a blatant disregard for the peace of a quiet afternoon. A matched team of 6 perfectly groomed chestnut horses, pulling a gleaming, custom-built carriage, thundered into Harmony Creek, the driver expertly navigating the narrow street, scattering chickens and sending dowl. Children scrambling for safety. The carriage halted before the mercantile, its polished brass fittings glinting in the harsh sunlight. A liveried footman leaped down, snapping open the door with a flourish that seemed almost mocking in its grandeur. From the depths of the plush interior emerged Silas Harding, a man built like a bull and radiating an aura of self-importance that could curdle milk. Harding surveyed the town with a dismissive sweep of his hand, his gaze lingering for a moment on the faded storefronts and the worn boardwalks. He wore a meticulously tailored suit of dark gray, a stark contrast to the rough-spun fabrics favored by the locals. A heavy gold chain stretched across his ample belly, and a diamond the size of a robin's egg adorned his pinky finger. Martha Olson, who seemed to materialize from thin air whenever gossip was brewing, hurried forward, her face a mask of simpering delight. "Mr. Harding, welcome to Harmony Creek. We are so honored to have you visit." Her voice dripped with honeyed insincerity, the kind reserved for those she deemed worthy of her attention. Harding acknowledged her with a curt nod. "Mrs. Olson, I believe? I wired ahead for accommodations at the hotel." His voice was a gravelly baritone, accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed. "Of course, Mr. Harding. Everything is prepared just as you requested. The best suite in the house." Martha practically vibrated with eagerness. She cast a pointed glance in Jebediah's direction, a silent condemnation of Susannah's presence on his porch. Harding, following her gaze, finally noticed Susannah. His eyes, cold and assessing, lingered on her for a moment, taking in her simple cotton dress, the way the sunlight caught in her hair, and the quiet strength in her posture. A flicker of something akin to interest, though devoid of genuine warmth, crossed his face. He strode towards them, his heavy boots thudding on the wooden planks. "And who might this be?" he asked, his voice laced with a condescending charm. Before Jebediah could respond, Susannah rose to her feet, meeting Harding's gaze directly. "I am Susannah Price, Mr. Harding, and this is Jebediah Blackwood." Her voice was calm and steady, a counterpoint to Harding's bluster. Harding offered a perfunctory bow. "Miss Price, a pleasure. Blackwood." He drawled the name, drawing out the syllables as if tasting something unpleasant. "The name is familiar. Weren't you expecting company recently?" The insinuation hung heavy in the air, a deliberate reminder of Jebediah's public humiliation. Jebediah's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he gripped the whittling knife. He wanted nothing more than to wipe the smirk off Harding's face, but Susannah gently laid a hand on his arm, a silent plea for restraint. "Mr. Harding," Susannah said, her voice unwavering. "I believe Mr. Blackwood's personal affairs are hardly a topic for polite conversation." She turned her attention back to Harding, her eyes holding a subtle warning. "What brings you to Harmony Creek?" Harding chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Business, Miss Price. I'm looking to expand my holdings. This area has potential." He let his gaze sweep over the town again, this time with a predatory glint in his eyes. "And perhaps other attractions as well." His eyes lingered on Susannah, making his meaning clear. Martha Olson, practically swooning at Harding's proximity, seized the opportunity to ingratiate herself further. "Mr. Harding is one of the wealthiest cattlemen in the territory. He owns thousands of acres, and, well, everything he sets his sights on." She punctuated her words with a significant glance at Susannah, clearly angling to play matchmaker. Susannah ignored Martha's blatant maneuvering. "Harmony Creek is a quiet town, Mr. Harding. We value our peace." Her words were polite, but there was an underlying steel in her tone that hinted at a strength Harding had clearly underestimated. "Peace is a luxury, Miss Price," Harding countered, his eyes narrowing. "One that comes at a price. And I am willing to pay it." He paused, letting his words sink in. Perhaps we could discuss this further over dinner. At the hotel, of course, the best Harmony Creek has to offer. Jebediah finally found his voice, his tone low and dangerous. Miss Price is occupied this evening, Harding. Harding turned his attention back to Jebediah, his gaze filled with disdain. Occupied? I hardly think. He paused, a slow smile spreading across his face. Unless, of course, Miss Price has other plans. He looked pointedly at Susannah, waiting for her response. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the distant crowing of a rooster and the rhythmic creaking of the porch swing. All eyes were on Susannah, waiting to see which path she would choose. Would she succumb to the allure of Harding's wealth and power, or would she stand by Jebediah, the man the town had already written off? The answer hung in the balance, shaping not only her own future, but Jebediah's as well. A father's expectations, the familiar scent of baking bread, usually a comfort, felt like a tightening snare as Susannah entered the kitchen. Her mother, Martha, flitted about, a hymn spilling softly from her lips, while Reverend Elijah Price, her father, presided over the weathered table, a citadel of sermons erected beside him. He acknowledged her arrival, his normally genial gaze shadowed with a gravity that knotted her stomach. "Susannah, dear, have a seat," he requested, his timbre weighted. Martha offered a fleeting, perceptive glance before returning to her culinary endeavors. Susannah perched on the stool, hands clasped tight, the air thick with unspoken burdens. "Mr. Harding came calling this morning," Reverend Price began, treading carefully. Susannah's spirits plummeted. She should have anticipated this. Silas Harding's visit the day before, his loaded comments, were all prologues to this very scene. "He seems quite well-to-do," she offered, striving for neutrality and avoiding his gaze. "Prosperous indeed," her father confirmed, leaning back. "He has cultivated a substantial cattle business and speaks admirably of you, Susannah. He considers you a woman of consequence." Susannah recoiled at that word. Was that her sole value? A mere asset for appraisal and trade. "I appreciate Mr. Harding's esteem," she managed, forcing politeness. "Though I'm uncertain I reciprocate his affections." A sigh escaped her father, heavy with disappointment. "Susannah, you are an intelligent woman. Surely you grasp the importance of security. Mr. Harding offers precisely that. He can provide a life of ease, a safe harbor. These are any father's desires for his daughter." "And what of my desires, father?" Susannah asked, her voice barely audible. Reverend Price's severity softened a fraction. "Your happiness is, of course, paramount. But happiness isn't always found in the ephemeral flicker of emotion, Susannah. Often, it blooms from the bedrock of a stable life." He paused, studying her face. "Consider Jebediah. He is, undoubtedly, a good man. But he is scarred. He has endured much and remains in the process of rebuilding. Can he truly guarantee the security you merit?" The question hung, a leaden weight. She pictured Jebediah, his quiet fortitude, the vulnerable honesty mirrored in his gaze. She recalled the hushed whispers, the judging eyes of some townsfolk. "Jebediah brings me joy, father," she declared, her voice gaining strength despite a tremor in her hands. "He treats me with respect, with gentleness. He listens. He makes me feel seen, truly seen." "Seen?" Reverend Price chuckled, a hint of condescension in the sound. "Mr. Harding recognizes your potential, Susannah. He envisions a woman who would elevate his household, enhance his standing. He sees a grand future for you. A future molded by him, not me, Susannah retorted, frustration bubbling. "I am not a blank slate for Mr. Harding to impose his vision upon. I possess my own aspirations, my own yearnings. And what exactly are those aspirations, Susannah?" her father inquired, skepticism coloring his tone. "To subsist in a crumbling farmhouse, eking out a living with a man haunted by his past." The words landed like blows, echoing the insidious doubts that sometimes plagued her, the fears she fought to quell. "Jebediah is not defined by his past, father," she insisted. "He is more than what occurred to him. He is kind, he is genuine, and he is striving. Isn't that the calling for us all to persevere?" Reverend Price rose, his towering form casting a long, encroaching shadow across the kitchen. "Susannah, I understand your fondness for Jebediah. He is a likable man. However, you must be practical. You must weigh what is best for your future." He moved to the window, gazing out at the undulating hills embracing their home. "I am not growing younger, Susannah. Your mother and I are concerned for your well-being. We desire assurance that you will be cared for, that you will be safe." He turned, his gaze a blend of concern and supplication. "Mr. Harding can ensure that safety, Susannah. He can offer a life devoid of worry. Can Jebediah extend the same?" Susannah remained silent. The question reverberated within her, a constant reminder of their precarious existence. She loved Jebediah, unequivocally. But was love sufficient? Could it conquer the obstacles looming before them? Could it silence the whispers and the condemnations? Could it furnish the security her father so desperately craved for her? "I need time to consider this, father," she finally managed, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "This is a monumental decision, and I require space to evaluate it thoroughly." Reverend Price nodded slowly, his expression inscrutable. "Of course, Susannah. Take whatever time you require. But please, consider wisely. Your happiness and your future hinge on it." Susannah left the stool, feeling the oppressive weight of her father's expectations. She exited the kitchen, the aroma of baking bread now a stark reminder of the pressure crushing her. She needed to escape, to breathe freely, to discover clarity amidst the tempest raging within. She knew where she needed to go, even if she lacked the words to speak when she arrived. She needed to see Jebediah, to search his eyes for the answer that remained elusive. As she departed the house, Martha's gaze met hers. Her mother offered a brief, mournful smile. Susannah knew that regardless of her choice, someone would suffer. The burden now rested squarely upon her shoulders. Unspoken feelings, the rhythmic clang of Jebediah's hammer, normally a reassuring pulse within his small blacksmith shop, felt leaden today, deadened by yesterday's visit from Susannah and the lingering dampness of the craw. Recent storm. He willed himself to focus, shaping a horseshoe with ingrained skill, the metal blooming with an inner fire under the forge's breath. Suddenly, a voice, sharp and acutely familiar, cut through the muffled sounds. Reverend Price, usually a fountain of sonorous pronouncements from the pulpit, now wielded his voice like a blade. Jebediah's hand stilled, the hammer poised above the anvil, a shiver tracing its path down his spine. The voices emanated from the wooden tool lientu Susannah must have sought out her father before heading home. He hadn't noticed her arrival. "Susannah, be practical. Harding represents security, stability luxuries Jebediah Stone can ill afford." Jebediah stiffened. His veins ran with icy water. He should turn away, yet his boots seemed fused to the floorboards. He heard the restless scrape of the Reverend's boots against the packed earth. Father, I understand your worries, but as I've said, Mr. Harding inspires no love. Susannah countered, her tone taut but unyielding. He is pleasant, perhaps, but there's no connection, no spark. Love is a bauble, Susannah, one we cannot afford to chase. Consider your mother's burdens. Harding's wealth could alleviate so much suffering. Jebediah barely scrapes by. Can you envision a future with him? A safe harbor? Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Jebediah's jaw tightened, the forge's warmth now a scorching torment. He yearned to vanish, to become one with the shadows. Each syllable, each insinuation, landed like a physical blow. But Father, Susannah finally breathed, her voice almost lost in the stillness. Isn't happiness worth more than mere survival? Happiness is ephemeral, Susannah. Security endures. Jebediah could endure no more. The half-formed horseshoe clattered to the floor, the sound booming through the shop, an echo of finality. He strode toward the lean-to, his face a study in controlled fury. Susannah gasped as he emerged, her eyes widening in surprise, a hint of something indecipherable flickering within their depths. Reverend Price pivoted, his face flushed with color, his expression a blend of displeasure and thinly veiled irritation. Jebediah, Susannah warned, her voice low. Reverend, Jebediah acknowledged curtly, his gaze locked on Susannah. Mr. Harding? He demanded, the question rough against his throat. Her eyes flickered from Jebediah to her father. He's been offering his affections, she admitted quietly. Offering his affections? Jebediah echoed, the words laced with acid. Is that the current euphemism? Reverend Price puffed out his chest, adopting a posture of authority. Mr. Stone, this is a family discussion. No, Reverend, Jebediah interrupted, his voice bedged with steel. It seems it also involves me. He turned back to Susannah, his gaze probing. Is it true, what your father implies? That you might choose him for financial stability? Her shoulders slumped as she averted her gaze. It's complicated, Jebediah. Complicated? He raked a hand through his hair, the gesture raw with frustration. Complicated because you harbor feelings for him? Or because your father is orchestrating this arrangement? Both, she whispered, the admission of physical ache in his chest. Logically, he knew Susannah was her own woman. Yet, the thought of her with Harding, a man who embodied everything he lacked, felt like a betrayal. Stepping closer, his voice dropped to a resonant murmur. Susannah, there's something I have to say. A tremor of fear coiled within him. Rejection was a familiar torment. Could he risk such exposure again, especially with her? He looked into her eyes, saw concern mirroring in their depths, perhaps even a fragile ember of anticipation. He drew a deep breath, the familiar sense of wood smoke and rain filling his lungs. I care for you, Susannah, he confessed, the words spilling forth, more than I believed possible. After everything, you were the light who pulled me back from the abyss. You showed me that goodness still existed. He faltered, his gaze dropping to the ground. But I understand, he continued, pain coloring his voice. I understand why you might choose him. He offers what I cannot. Security, a position of standing. I'm just a blacksmith. A man jilted at the altar. He looked up, his eyes reflecting a stark vulnerability, seldom revealed. I needed you to know, before you decide. Reverend Price cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. Susannah reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. He flinched almost imperceptibly, unsure he could bear the sting of her touch, her dismissal. "Jebediah," she began, her voice gentle, laced with a sorrowful note. "Don't say that. It's not about material offerings. It's about what my heart desires, my deepest needs." He looked at her, a tentative hope sparking within him, like kindling catching flame. "And what might those be, Susannah?" he asked, barely a whisper. "What is it you crave? What do you need?" She hesitated, her gaze flitting between him and her father. The immense weight of her decision, the relentless pressure of her family, hung palpable in the air. In that instant, he knew his fate, his very future, rested on the words about to pass her lips. The air thrummed with unspoken emotions, the burden of expectations, and the delicate promise of a love that dared to defy them all. Conflicted hearts, the quiet after Jebediah's confession was a palpable thing, denser than the sunlit dust swirling in his cabin's single window. Susannah's usually bright countenance had shuddered, revealing the turmoil within. Her fingers worried the hem of her cotton dress, a frantic, silent language of Ka. Distress, hope, newly sprouted in Jebediah's chest, now threatened to be choked by her hesitation. He hadn't anticipated instant reciprocation, but the depth of her inner conflict struck him like a physical blow. At last, she spoke, her voice a fragile thread. "Oh, Jebediah," she sighed, tears brimming. "That shouldn't have been said." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "But it's the truth, Susannah. Every last word." He edged closer, then paused, respecting the unseen wall she'd erected. "Don't you feel it as well? Something altered?" Her gaze lifted, probing his. "Yes," she conceded. The word wrested from her against her will. "That's precisely what makes this so untenable." Jebediah's brow furrowed. "Untenable? Why?" "Because," she countered, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "What will people think? You endured that humiliation, Jebediah. Jilted at the altar. And I am the preacher's daughter. It's unseemly. Not what is expected." The sting of old shame pricked him at her words. The whispers, the sidelong glances, he knew them well. He'd fought to ignore them, burying himself in his labor, yet they echoed in unguarded moments. Reminders of his public heartbreak. Was he doomed to be forever defined by that single devastating rejection? "Is that your final answer, then?" he asked, his tone devoid of inflection. "Will you surrender your happiness to the dictates of this town?" Susannah spun away, pacing with restless energy. "It isn't simply the town, Jebediah. It's my family. My father. He desires security for me. He considers Mr. Harding advantageous." "Advantageous?" "He sees him as an escape route," Jebediah shot back, bitterness lacing his words. "A way to guarantee your future, irrespective of your emotions." She halted, confronting him, her eyes flashing with defiance. "That's unfair." "My father cherishes me." "And what of your own feelings, Susannah?" Jebediah countered, his voice softening. "What of your own heart's desire?" The fight ebbed from her face, replaced by a deep weariness. My heart is a battlefield," she confessed. "I care for you, Jebediah, more than I should, perhaps. You are kind and an attentive listener, and you truly see me in a way no one else ever has. But Mr. Harding offers stability." assurance, a life untroubled by hardship, and a life devoid of love? Jebediah pressed, closing the distance between them. He reached out, his fingertips tracing the curve of her cheek. She didn't recoil. Is that truly what you seek, Susannah? A gilded cage? Her eyelids fluttered shut, and she leaned into his touch, a silent entreaty for direction. The silence stretched, laden with unspoken longing. He felt the tremor that rippled through her, the civil war raging within her. I don't know what I want, she finally breathed, her voice choked with unshed tears. Jebediah framed her face with his hands, his thumbs gently erasing the tracks of her tears. It's all right to be frightened, Susannah, he soothed. It's all right to be uncertain, but don't allow fear to make the choice for you. Don't permit another soul to chart your course. He lowered his head, resting his brow against hers. He could feel the warmth of her breath against his skin, the frantic rhythm of her heart mirroring his own. Just heed your heart, Susannah, he murmured. It will guide you true. He knew he was asking a great deal. He possessed nothing to offer but his affection, his unwavering loyalty. He couldn't promise riches or security, only a life steeped in honesty and passion, a life lived on their terms, regardless of societal judgment. Susannah's arms encircled him, her grip tight. He embraced her close, offering her the solace and strength he sensed she desperately craved. He made no move to kiss her, to rush her beyond her comfort. He simply held her, a haven amid the tempest of her divided loyalties. After an age, she drew back, her eyes red-rimmed, yet with a dawning resolve. I require time, Jebediah, she stated, her voice regaining some of its timbre. I need to reflect, to seek guidance, to ascertain the correct course of action. Jebediah nodded, understanding etched on his face. Take all the time that you need, he assured her. I'll remain here. He watched as she moved toward the door, her shoulders bowed beneath the burden of her decision. Before she crossed the threshold, she glanced back, a spark of hope flickering in her eyes. Jebediah, she whispered. Thank you. Then she was gone, leaving him alone again, yet this time the silence resonated differently. It wasn't the silence of despair, but the hush of anticipation, of possibility suspended in the air. He anticipated difficult days ahead, fraught with uncertainty and doubt, but he knew that he had, at last, voiced his truth, and that Susannah, despite her anxieties, harbored feelings for him too. That, he understood, was enough to fuel his hope. He would wait, patiently, for her to discover her own truth, confident that her heart would ultimately lead her back to him. Gazing skyward, he felt that love can sometimes be worth the wait. Courting and competition. Silas Harding's campaign began with a statement. A duel of spirited chestnut mares, delivered to Price's livery stable, accompanied by a note for Susannah. Jebediah, retrieving his own, more pragmatic mount, couldn't miss them. Show animals, pure and simple, their silver-trimmed harnesses catching the light like captured stars. An ostentatious display calculated to impress. And it did. Later, Susannah sought him out in his workshop. The steady ring of hammer on steel stilled as she approached, her expression a complicated mix of worry and something else he couldn't quite name. Those horses, Jebediah. They're exquisite, she began, choosing her words with care. But Papa's already considering accepting Mr. Harding's generosity. Jebediah's jaw hardened. Generosity? Sounds more like a transaction, Susannah. He's trying to purchase your goodwill. He tossed the hammer down, the sound amplified in the sudden quiet. Susannah sighed, her gaze tracing patterns on the worn floorboards. "I know, and I told him I couldn't possibly accept such a lavish offering. But Papa, he sees it as a sign of Mr. Harding's serious intentions." "Intentions bought and paid for," Jebediah grumbled under his breath. He scrubbed a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of forge grime across his brow. The familiar ache of inadequacy resurfaced, the ghost of past. Failures looming. "Don't say that," she countered softly, yet with resolve. She edged closer, her fingers brushing his arm. "It's not about money, Jebediah. It's about appearances. About what others deem suitable." "And what do you deem suitable, Susannah?" His eyes searched hers, desperate for a flicker of hope in the gathering gloom. She hesitated, her gaze skittering away. I honestly don't know. That's the crux of it." Saturday dawned buzzing with excitement for the monthly social. Jebediah typically shunned such affairs, deeming them shallow and tiresome. But tonight, he knew he had to be present. He needed to witness the competition firsthand. He arrived late, the lilting fiddle and convivial murmur leading him to the brightly illuminated hall. The atmosphere thrummed with perfume, sawdust, and barely contained anxieties. He located Susannah almost immediately, radiant in a sapphire gown that mirrored the depth of her eyes. She stood beside Silas Harding, who was clasping her hand and erupting in laughter at something she'd said. Harding practically vibrated with affluence, his bespoke suit, pricey timepiece, and self-assured demeanor telegraphed his wealth. He regarded Susannah like a prize to be won, a bauble to add to his collection. Jebediah watched, his gut twisting. He saw Harding guide Susannah onto the dance floor, their movements polished and rehearsed. He saw Harding whisper something, and Susannah's smile, pleasant but lacking warmth. He saw the possessive way Harding's hand lingered on her lower back. He clenched his fists, resisting the urge to march over and whisk Susannah away. He knew that would only worsen matters, confirming everyone's dim view of him. He was the blacksmith, once jilted, the object of town gossip. Harding was the prosperous businessman, a respected pillar of the community. Whose suit would she prefer? Later, during a musical interlude, Harding shepherded Susannah to the refreshment table, loading her plate with an assortment of cakes. He addressed her with a faintly condescending air, as if she were a child deserving of indulgence. Jebediah noticed Susannah's subtle tightening of expression, a fleeting shadow of irritation. Fortifying himself, Jebediah approached, his heart drumming against his peppera. "Ribs. Good evening, Susannah." "Mr. Harding." He offered a curt nod. "Stone," Harding acknowledged dismissively, before turning his attention fully back to Susannah, effectively dismissing Jebediah. "As I was saying, Miss Price, these local gatherings possess a certain quaintness, but lack refinement. In Boston, we attend galas with orchestras and cascades of champagne. I'm sure they're impressive, Mr. Harding," Susannah responded coolly. "But I find a particular charm in the simplicity here." Harding chuckled, patting her hand in a proprietary manner. "You're too modest, my dear. You deserve only the finest." He turned to Jebediah, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Stone, isn't it? I understand you're a skilled craftsman. Perhaps you could fashion a new horseshoe for my prize stallion. Generously compensated, of course." The slight was blatant. Harding was offering a handout, underscoring the disparity in their social standing. Jebediah's anger simmered, close to boiling. "I'm rather occupied at present, Mr. Harding," Jebediah replied, his voice carefully modulated. He fixed his gaze on Susannah, pointedly ignoring Harding's presence. "I was hoping for a word with you, Susannah, if you have a moment." Harding's grip on Susannah's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Price is otherwise engaged this evening, Stone. Perhaps another time." He stewed Susannah away, toward the dance floor, leaving Jebediah isolated, a metallic taste of failure coating his tongue. He watched them dance, Harding's hand clamped firmly on Susannah's back. Jebediah knew he couldn't concede. He couldn't allow Harding to simply purchase Susannah's affections. He had to contend for her, demonstrate his worthiness, despite his past and his lack of fortune. He simply lacked a plan. As the evening deepened, Jebediah's frustration mounted. He observed Harding lavishing attention on Susannah, monopolizing her company, and effectively excluding her from the others. He saw the glittering necklace Harding fastened around her throat, a dazzling testament to his wealth and influence. Each gesture, each interaction, felt like a jolt, eroding his resolve, amplifying his despair. He departed the social early, the joyous sounds receding behind him. He trudged back to his small cottage, the encompassing darkness echoing the chaos in his spirit. He felt adrift, lost in a sea of doubt. He knew he loved Susannah, yet he feared his love was insufficient. He was merely Jebediah Stone, the blacksmith, the man left at the altar. What could he offer Susannah Price, in contrast to the security and affluence Silas Harding represented? He sat on his porch, gazing at the distant constellations, wondering if a solitary fate awaited him. The wind sighed through the trees, carrying a subtle fragrance of impending rain. He closed his eyes, conjuring Susannah's face, her radiant smile, the sparkle in her eyes when truly contented. He knew he had to try, had to fight for her, even with the odds against him. He couldn't relinquish her without a struggle. He just needed to devise a way to prevail. The cattle competition, the scent of hay and manure clung to Jebediah's clothes as he brushed down Bess, his prize heifer. The cattle competition at the Founders' Day social was only days away, and he poured every spare moment into preparing her. He needed to show Susannah, and everyone else in Harmony Creek, that he wasn't just the man jilted at the altar. He was a man of substance, of grit, of potential. He imagined Susannah watching him, her eyes sparkling with pride, and the image fueled his efforts. Caleb Johnson leaned against the barn door, chewing on a piece of straw. "She's looking good, Jeb," he drawled, his voice as steady and reliable as the earth itself. "Best heifer in the county, I reckon." Jebediah grunted, unconvinced. "Harding's got that imported bull. Cost him a fortune, I heard." "Bess has got to be perfect to stand a chance." Caleb spat out the straw. "Money ain't everything, Jeb. Bess has got heart, and she's got you." That night, under the cloak of a near-full moon, Silas Harding stood at the edge of Jebediah's property, a sneer twisting his lips. He surveyed the humble barn, the meager pasture. It was pathetic compared to his own spread. With him was a hired hand, a shifty-eyed man named Earl, known for his willingness to bend the rules for the right price. "You understand what needs to be done, Earl?" Harding's voice was low, menacing. Earl nodded, his eyes darting nervously. "Just like you said, Mr. Harding. A little something to distract the heifer, nothing permanent, mind you." Harding pulled a wad of bills from his pocket. "Permanent or not, I don't want that beast anywhere near the prize circle. And I certainly don't want Stone looking like a worthy competitor in front of Miss Susannah." He peeled off several bills and handed them to Earl. "See that it's done properly." The day of the Founders' Day social dawned, bright and clear. The air buzzed with excitement. Jebediah, despite a gnawing anxiety, felt a surge of determination as he led Bess toward the competition ring. He had spent hours grooming her, her coat gleaming under the sun. He caught Susannah's eye across the crowd. She offered him a small, encouraging smile, and his heart leaped. He could do this. He had to. The competition began. Farmers from all over the county paraded their cattle before the judges, a panel of seasoned ranchers. Harding, resplendent in a tailored suit, stood beside his massive bull, its muscles rippling. He cast a condescending glance at Jebediah, a silent challenge in his eyes. Jebediah ignored him, focusing on Bess. He walked her with practiced ease, showcasing her strong build and gentle temperament. The judges examined her closely, their expressions inscrutable. "Stone. Jebediah Stone," the lead judge announced, his voice booming across the field. "Heifer shows excellent conformation and good muscling, a fine example of local breeding." A ripple of applause went through the crowd. Jebediah felt a surge of hope. He was in the running. Then, disaster struck. Bess, usually so calm and docile, suddenly went wild. She bucked, kicked, and let out a panicked bellow. Jebediah struggled to control her, his face flushed with exertion. The crowd gasped, then began to murmur. He wrestled with Bess, trying to understand what had triggered her outburst. He noticed a faint, acrid smell in the air, a scent he couldn't quite place. Harding watched with a smug expression, leaning against the railing. Finally, Jebediah managed to subdue Bess, but the damage was done. She was clearly agitated, her coat matted with sweat. The judges frowned, their earlier praise replaced with disapproval. "Stone," the lead judge said, shaking his head. "We can't award a prize to an animal that's so unpredictable. We'll have to disqualify her." Jebediah felt the blood drain from his face. Disqualified. All his hard work, all his hopes, dashed in an instant. He looked at Susannah, her face a mask of concern. He led Bess away from the ring, his shoulders slumped. He knew, with a sinking certainty, that Harding was behind this. The smug look on his face was all the proof he needed. Caleb met him at the edge of the field, his brow furrowed. "What happened, Jeb? She was fine just this morning." "Sabotage," Jebediah muttered, his voice tight with anger. "Harding. He must have paid someone to spook her." Caleb's jaw clenched. "But, low down, we can't let him get away with this." Jebediah shook his head, defeated. "What can we do, Caleb? It's his word against ours, and everyone in town already thinks I'm a fool." Susannah approached them, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Jebediah," she said softly, laying a hand on his arm. "I saw what happened. It wasn't your fault." He looked at her, his heart aching. "It doesn't matter, Susannah. Harding's won. He's got the money, the influence, and he's got your father's approval." Susannah's expression hardened. "My father's approval isn't everything, Jebediah. Don't give up so easily." She looked at Caleb, then back at Jebediah. "There's still the pie-eating contest," she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "And the horseshoe tournament. And the talent show. You might not have won the cattle competition, but you've still got plenty of chances to prove yourself." Jebediah managed a weak smile. Susannah's unwavering belief in him was a lifeline in the midst of his despair. He knew he couldn't give up. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance, however slim, to win her heart. He looked out at the Founders' Day social, the laughter and music a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. The day was far from over, and he had a score to settle. Harding might have won this battle, but the war for Susannah's heart was just beginning. Unmasked and nervous energy thrummed in the air as Jebediah braced himself for the horseshoe pitch. This wasn't just about prize money. It was about proving his worth, silencing the snickers, and showing Susannah and damn near every soul in town that he was more than just a lovesick sap courting failure. He conjured her image in the throng. Those intelligent eyes, the slight quirk of her lips when lost in thought. The vision steeled his resolve. The horseshoe, cool and substantial in his grip, felt like an old friend. He focused, inhaling deeply, shutting out the surrounding hubbub. Then, a searing prickle exploded on his throwing arm, a jolt of pure agony. He cried out, the horseshoe veering wildly off course to land with a soft plop, woefully short of the mark. He spun around, cradling his arm. A small, jagged stone rested on the ground nearby. Silas Harding stood just feet away, a smug expression twisting his features. Jebediah's eyes trailed to a cluster of hired hands, boys really, who scattered like startled birds when they met his gaze. Accident stone? Harding drawled, his voice dripping with contempt. What wretched luck! Some fellows simply aren't built for games. A wave of incandescent rage washed over Jebediah. It wasn't simply the botched throw, the squandered opportunity. It was the calculated insult, the blatant mockery of fairness. He surged forward, seizing Harding by the lapels of his tailored coat. You slimy snake, Jebediah bellowed, his voice ragged with fury. He shoved Harding back against a wall of stacked hay bales. The crowd gasped, a wave of hushed sounds rippling through the observers. Harding, momentarily taken aback, quickly regained his composure. He sneered, his gaze hardening to chips of ice. Release me at once, you a boor. Do you even comprehend who I am? I know exactly who you are. Jebediah spat, his hold tightening. A low-down cheat who has to rig the game to even stand a chance. Before Harding could retaliate, a gentle but firm grip landed on Jebediah's shoulder. Jebediah, enough. It was Susannah. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and a something he couldn't decipher. Disappointment? Jebediah instantly released Harding, mortification flooding him. He hadn't desired for her to witness this uncouth display. Harding smoothed his jacket, his composure returning like a practiced routine. He glared at Jebediah before turning to Susannah, forcing a saccharine smile. My dear Susannah, are you unharmed? This ruffian nearly assaulted me. Susannah didn't mirror his smile. Her attention remained fixed on Harding, her expression an inscrutable mask. What transpired here, Mr. Harding? She inquired, her tone even and controlled. Harding chuckled, nervously. Just a misunderstanding. Mr. Stone seems to be a rather poor sport. I believe he needs a lesson in gracious losing. He was robbed, a voice called from the assembled crowd. It was Martha, the baker's wife, her cheeks flushed with indignation. I glimpsed those boys. They logged something at his arm. Other voices chimed in, a chorus of agreement. Accusations pointed at Harding and his cronies. The balance began to shift. Susannah's eyes narrowed into slits. She swiveled back to Harding, her tone like honed steel. Is this accurate? Harding's face grew florid. He stammered, I have no comprehension of their insinuations. It's preposterous. But the falsehood hung in the atmosphere, palpable and heavy. Susannah approached Harding, her voice barely audible. Don't patronize my intelligence, Mr. Harding. While I dwell in a small community, I am not blind. She paused, her gaze unwavering. I discerned the look you gave Jebediah subsequent to the event, that was not the countenance of an innocent man. Harding's carefully crafted charade disintegrated. His eyes blazed with resentment, the superficial smile replaced by a frigid, malevolent stare. "You ungrateful little—" he began, but checked himself, catching the gaffe. He summoned another smile, though it failed to reach his eyes. "Susannah, darling, disregard these envious gossips. They are merely attempting to stir up mischief." Susannah recoiled slightly, as if struck. "Envy? Is that what you believe this boils down to? You think I harbor aspirations for your wealth or your connections?" She stepped back, creating a distance between them. "I surmised you were a gentleman, Mr. Harding. I thought you possessed a kindness. But I now realize my error. You are akin to the other men in this town who presuppose they can purchase their way into any situation." Her pronouncements lingered in the air, a potent reprimand. Harding's face contorted with fury. The facade had vanished, revealing the arrogant, entitled individual beneath. "You will rue this decision, Susannah," he hissed, his voice a low threat. "You will lament choosing him over me." He dismissed Jebediah with a wave, who stood silently, witnessing the unfolding drama. "He is but a failure, a figure of ridicule. He will never provide you with the life you merit." Susannah remained unblinking. She stood tall, her chin raised, her eyes sparkling with defiance. "I have no requirement for your finances, Mr. Harding, and I most assuredly do not need your validation. I shall determine for myself the trajectory of my life, and it will not be in partnership with an individual who embraces deceit and intimidation to achieve his desires." She looked away from him, her eyes connecting with Jebediah's. There existed a glint of something within her gaze, a touch of vulnerability, yet also a nascent resolve. He detected a query there, a request for comprehension. Harding, defeated and humiliated, stormed off, plowing through the crowd, his face a mask of wrath. The onlookers parted before him, their whispers trailing in his wake. The cheerful atmosphere of the Founders' Day celebration had been fractured, replaced by a charged, uneasy silence. Jebediah took a step in Susannah's direction, his heart hammering in his chest. He was bereft of words, uncertain of the appropriate action. He only understood that he must try, must fight for her, to demonstrate that he was deserving of her affections. But as he parted his lips to speak, Susannah spun and walked away, disappearing into the gathering. He was left standing solitary, the weight of her words and the challenge they offered bearing down upon him. Triumph and rejection the morning air, thick with the reek of fertilizer and charged with anticipation, pressed down on the fairgrounds. The cattle competition, Founders' Day's centerpiece, offered ranchers a stage for their bovine behemoths, and offered Jebediah something more, a chance to bury the humiliation of his abandoned wedding. He stroked Samson's flank, the bull's muscles bunching and flexing beneath his glossy hide, a testament to Jebediah's tireless dedication. Every free moment had been spent nurturing Samson, a symphony of feeding, grooming, and whispered encouragement. Across the corral, Silas Harding postured beside his own entry, a brutish animal whose small eyes held a spark of malice. Their gazes locked. Silas's lips curved in a self-satisfied sneer. Jebediah ignored him, channeling his focus back to Samson, offering a low word of comfort. Silas wouldn't rattle him this time. Not today. Mr. Abernathy, the judge, a lean, weathered rancher, began his assessment. His gaze, sharp as flint, missed nothing as he circled each contender, a poke here, a prod there, his face an inscrutable mask. The crowd's murmurs intensified the prickle of tension already lacing the air. Jebediah stood tall, the frantic thump of his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, fighting for composure. Abernathy halted before Samson, his calloused hand tracing the bull's powerful back. A lingering pause at the impressive shoulders, another at the sturdy legs. Jebediah held his breath hostage. The judge moved on, circling Harding's bull with a curt nod, his expression unchanged. An eternity crawled by before Abernathy cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the expectant hush. "And the winner," he proclaimed, his voice raspy with years in the sun, "is Jebediah Stone Sampson." A stunned silence broke into a wave of whispered surprise, then a hesitant ripple of applause. Disbelief washed over Jebediah. He'd actually won. A genuine grin split his face as he slapped Sampson's broad back, the bull responding with a low, victorious bellow. Silas' features soured, his smugness evaporating like morning mist. He stalked toward Jebediah, fury blazing in his eyes. "Impossible," he spat, his voice a low hiss. "Some mistake's been made." Jebediah stood firm, emboldened by newfound confidence. "No mistake, Harding. Sampson is the best." Silas' fist clenched, but before he could retort, a sudden hush fell. Every eye turned to the grandstand, where Susannah Price stood, a beacon in a simple blue dress. She held a small, ornately carved wooden box. Jebediah's heart lurched. Silas, ever the opportunist, smoothed his coat and surged forward, an avaricious glint in his eye. He reached her as she descended the steps, his voice dripping with false charm. "Susannah, my dear, you have something to announce, I believe." Susannah inhaled deeply, her gaze sweeping across the crowd before settling on Jebediah. He glimpsed a flicker of resolve in her eyes, a delicate balance of apprehension and steel. She turned to Silas, head held high. "Yes, Silas, I do," she declared, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the silence. "You have asked for my hand." She extended the box. "And this?" She opened it, revealing a diamond ring that glittered like captured starlight. "Is your answer." She snapped the box shut, holding it firm. Silas reached for it, face flushed with triumph, but Susannah recoiled. "I cannot accept your proposal, Silas," she stated with unwavering certainty. "I do not love you, and I refuse to settle for less." A collective gasp erupted, louder than before. Silas' face twisted, disbelief giving way to incandescent rage. "You dare reject me? Before everyone?" Susannah met his fury with composure. "I dare to be honest, Silas. With you, with myself, with everyone present." Silence descended, heavier than the morning air, punctuated only by the drone of insects and a distant rooster's call. The townsfolk remained motionless, their faces a tableau of shock, awe, and the first glimmer of rebellion. Unheard of. A woman rejecting Silas Harding's wealth and status? A fissure in the town's rigid social strata. Mrs. Abernathy, the town's resident gossip, erupted in frantic whispers to her neighbor, eyes wide with delicious scandal. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, a wildfire of speculation. Some looked aghast, others intrigued, and a few, particularly the younger women, wore expressions of open admiration. Humiliated and incandescent, Silas turned on Susannah, his voice laced with malice. "You'll regret this, Susannah. You'll crawl back when you realize what you've squandered." Susannah remained unmoved. "I doubt that, Silas. Now, if you'll excuse me." She turned and walked away, leaving him stranded in the center of the fairgrounds, a monument to thwarted ambition. As Susannah approached, Jebediah felt a surge of hope mingled with profound respect. She had defied convention, risked ostracism, all for authenticity. He wasn't sure what it meant for them, but he knew his feelings for her had deepened. "Hello, Jebediah," she greeted him, a tentative smile gracing her lips. "Congratulations." "Susannah," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "What you did incredible." She shrugged, her smile broadening. "I simply did what I had to, Jebediah. What felt right." The crowd began to disperse, the initial shock receding into a buzz of animated conversation. Some cast furtive glances their way, curiosity and judgment warring in their expressions. Jebediah paid them no mind. All that mattered was Susannah, her eyes alight with hope. He knew the road ahead was long, fraught with the task of proving his worth and overcoming the town's disapproval. But for the first time in years, a spark of hope ignited within him. He had triumphed in the competition, earning a measure of respect, and Susannah's rejection of Silas had cracked open a door, however slightly, to a future he hadn't dared to imagine. The war was far from won, but today he had tasted victory, and that, coupled with Susannah's brave stance, fueled his resolve to fight for their chance at something real. A second-chance dust devils danced around the stagecoach as it ground to a halt before the general store. Jebediah, still buoyed by Samson's triumph and Susannah's avowal, felt a cold dread tighten his gut as a familiar figure emerged. Sarah, her emerald dress, a stark contrast to the townswomen's simple cottons, seemed almost vulgar under the sun's glare. She smoothed the shimmering fabric, her gaze sweeping the onlookers until it snagged on him. A tempest of emotion churned within him. Bitterness, lingering pain, a ghost of the affection he thought long extinguished. But a newfound fortitude solidified his resolve. Never again. Sarah hurried toward him, words tumbling out in a rush. "Jebediah, we need to talk." He folded his arms, a bulwark of defiance. "I doubt that, Sarah." His voice was a low, flinty rasp. "Please, Jebediah, I erred grievously. I was young, impetuous." Unshed tears shimmered in her eyes. She reached for him, but he flinched back as if stung. "Impetuous? You left me jilted at the altar, Sarah, a laughingstock before the entire community. Impetuous hardly suffices." Each word was a precise cut. I know, and I'm so desperately sorry. I imagined Silas offered a gilded cage. I was mistaken, terribly so. He's a void, Jebediah, devoid of warmth. He can't love." Her voice fractured. A sardonic chuckle bubbled from Jebediah. "So now you slink back, having sampled the finery and found it wanting?" "No! It's not transactional. I realized what I forfeited. I realized my heart belonged to you, Jebediah, and it always will." His eyes narrowed to slits. "Spare me the platitudes, Sarah. Don't defile those words after your actions. My heart isn't a bauble to be cast aside and reclaimed at your whim." He noticed Susannah approaching, her expression an inscrutable mask. He turned back to Sarah, his voice a hushed warning. "I've rebuilt my life, Sarah. I've discovered someone who cherishes me for who I am, not for what I possess. Someone who values my soul, not my prospects." He reached for Susannah's hand, his touch both tender and firm. "I'm with Susannah now." Sarah's composure crumbled. "Susannah? But she's—" Her voice faltered, the unspoken judgment hanging heavy in the air. Susannah met Sarah's gaze squarely, her chin lifting defiantly. "I am with Jebediah, and my happiness is complete." Jebediah squeezed Susannah's hand in reassurance. You should leave, Sarah. You'll find only disappointment here. He watched as she retreated toward the stagecoach, her posture conveying utter defeat. He registered a faint twinge of pity, quickly eclipsed by the comforting warmth of Susannah's hand in his. Later that evening, Jebediah and Susannah swayed gently on the porch swing, the sunset bleeding across the sky in vibrant hues. A peaceful silence descended, a wordless understanding blossoming between them. "What was your father's reaction?" Jebediah finally asked, breaking the stillness. He was certain Reverend Price's opinion of him hadn't improved lately. Susannah exhaled softly. "He's conflicted. He remains convinced that Silas represented a more stable future. But," she hesitated, inhaling deeply, "he observed us today. He saw the depth of my feelings for you, the way you look at me. And I think perhaps he finally comprehended." He waited, his pulse throbbing in his ears. Susannah offered a radiant, hopeful smile. He conceded that his greatest desire is my happiness. And if I believe you are the source of that happiness, then he would no longer stand in opposition." Relief surged through Jebediah, almost buckling his knees. He truly said that?" Susannah nodded, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears. "He did. He even admitted he's witnessed a transformation in you, Jebediah, that you've matured into a finer man, a stronger one." Jebediah reached out, framing her face with his hands. "That is entirely your doing, Susannah. You had faith in me when no one else did. You gifted me the aspiration to be better." He lowered his head and kissed her, a lingering, heartfelt kiss filled with gratitude, anticipation, and a love that defied every obstacle. A throat clearing shattered their reverie. Reverend Price stood on the porch, his face a tableau of solemnity and something else. "A hint of approval, perhaps." "Jebediah," he addressed him, his voice unexpectedly mild. "A word, if you please." Jebediah tensed, but Susannah offered a reassuring squeeze. He rose and walked toward the Reverend, bracing himself for a stern lecture. "I won't feign complete delight in this union," Reverend Price began, his gaze direct. "I harbor lingering misgivings. Your history, your limited prospects." Jebediah nodded, acknowledging the validity of the concerns. "However," Reverend Price continued, "I cannot dismiss what I witnessed this day. The depth of affection in your eyes for my daughter was undeniable, and her regard for you is equally profound. It's self-evident." He paused, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Susannah has always possessed an indomitable spirit. If she has fixed her heart upon you, then I suspect any attempt to dissuade her would be futile." Jebediah swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "I understand, Reverend, and I vow to dedicate myself to ensuring her happiness, to safeguard her, to provide for her needs." Reverend Price scrutinized him intently, as if seeking to penetrate his very soul. "I am inclined to believe you," he finally declared. "But mere belief is insufficient. You must validate it through your actions, each and every day. You must demonstrate, to her and to the entire community, that you are deserving of her devotion." Jebediah nodded, his resolve hardening like steel. "I will, Reverend. I pledge it." Reverend Price extended his hand, his expression softening. Jebediah grasped it, the gesture serving as a silent compact, a promise tendered and a challenge embraced. As Jebediah rejoined Susannah, a wave of hope washed over him. He had been granted a reprieve, a chance to redeem himself, a chance to love without reservation, a chance to cultivate a future alongside the woman he cherished. He understood the path ahead would be arduous, Obstacles, adversities, and naysayers would surely appear. Yet, with Susannah by his side, he felt capable of confronting any adversity. He was no longer merely the scorned man left waiting at the altar. He was a man imbued with purpose, a man whose love was worth fighting for, a man poised to embrace his destiny. The bells ring true, the old oak stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching like supplicating arms towards the boundless sky. Beneath it, dappled sunlight painted shifting patterns on the grass, a gentle choreography mirroring the tremor in Jebediah's hands. He clutched the small velvet box, its weight a tangible representation of the hope and fear churning within him. He could almost taste the dust kicked up from the dirt and the sweet scent of honeysuckle blooming nearby. Susannah was late. Or perhaps it only felt that way. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a cricket, amplified the pounding of his heart. He replayed the conversation with Reverend Price in his mind, the weight of the man's conditional blessing still heavy on his shoulders. "Prove yourself, Jebediah," the Reverend had said, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "Show me you can provide for my daughter, that you can offer her more than just heartache." The words stung, a stark reminder of his perceived inadequacies. Finally he saw her, a vision in pale blue, her hair a cascade of sunlight and shadow. She moved with a grace that always stole his breath, her eyes the color of the summer sky, searching for him. As she drew closer, he noticed the faint lines of worry etched around her mouth. He suddenly felt a surge of determination to erase them forever. "Jebediah," she breathed, her voice a soft melody. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." He managed a weak smile. "Never, Susannah, never about you." He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I wanted to ask you something important." He knelt, the movement stiff with nerves. He opened the velvet box, revealing a simple gold band, engraved with a single word: always. It wasn't a diamond, it wasn't extravagant, but it was everything he had to offer. "Susannah," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I'm not much. I don't have wealth, or land, or any of the things that your father that Silas can offer. But I have my heart, and it belongs to you, completely and irrevocably." He paused, searching her eyes. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you share your life with me, even though I can only promise you my unwavering love and devotion?" The silence stretched, punctuated only by the buzzing of bees in the nearby wildflowers. He saw a myriad of emotions flicker across her face: doubt, fear, and, finally, a radiant joy that eclipsed them all. Tears welled in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Oh, Jebediah," she whispered, "you foolish, wonderful man. Of course I will marry you." He rose, pulling her into his arms. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair, the scent of wildflowers and sunshine filling his senses. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, bound together by a love that defied expectations and overcame adversity. He kissed her then, a tender kiss that spoke of promises and shared dreams. The days that followed were a flurry of activity. Susannah, with the help of her friends and neighbors, began planning the wedding. The community, initially hesitant and judgmental, slowly began to embrace the idea of Jebediah and Susannah's union. Caleb Johnson, in particular, was Cain. A whirlwind of support, his gruff exterior barely concealing his genuine happiness for his friend. He helped Jebediah repair the small church, replacing rotten planks and repainting the weathered facade. But even amidst the joy, there were whispers. Silas Harding, though publicly defeated, remained a lurking presence, his resentment a palpable force in the town. Jebediah heard rumors of muttered threats and veiled accusations, but he refused to let them dampen his spirits. Had Susannah's love, and that was all that mattered. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect reflection of the hope that filled their hearts. The church, freshly painted and adorned with wildflowers, buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors, friends, and even a few curious onlookers filled the pews. Jebediah stood at the altar, his heart pounding in his chest. He wore a borrowed suit, slightly too large but impeccably clean. He watched as Susannah walked down the Fursana, her father by her side. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness. He forgot about Silas, about the whispers, about everything but the woman walking towards him. Reverend Price performed the ceremony, his voice surprisingly warm and sincere. He spoke of love, commitment, and the importance of forgiveness. When he asked if anyone objected, a hush fell over the crowd. Jebediah held his breath, bracing himself for the inevitable interruption, but it never came. Silas Harding was nowhere to be seen. Susannah and Jebediah exchanged vows, their voices clear and strong. He promised to love her, to cherish her, and to protect her for all the days of his life. She promised to stand by him, to support him, and to believe in him, always. With this ring, Jebediah said, slipping the gold band onto her finger, I thee wed. Susannah repeated the words, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Price declared, his voice filled with emotion. You may kiss the bride. Jebediah didn't hesitate. He pulled Susannah into his arms and kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that sealed their vows and proclaimed their love to the world. As they stepped out of the church, hand in hand, the bells began to ring. Loud and clear, their joyous peals echoed through the valley, celebrating not only their love but also their resilience, their courage, and their unwavering belief in each other. The reception was held in the town square, a simple but heartfelt celebration. Tables laden with food lined the perimeter, and music filled the air. People laughed, danced, and offered their congratulations. Even Reverend Price seemed to be enjoying himself, a rare smile gracing his lips. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the square, Jebediah and Susannah stood together, watching the festivities. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. We did it, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Susannah leaned her head against his shoulder. Yes, we did. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with love. And this is just the beginning. He knew she was right. Their journey wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, hardships, and moments of doubt. But they would face them together, hand in hand, their love a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed dark and uncertain. The bells continued to ring, their music a promise of a future filled with love, laughter, and unwavering commitment. A future they would build together, brick by brick, with faith, hope, and an abundance of love.